Hello and welcome back to my channel. If you didn't know, I'm a diagnosed narcissist, but before I say the things I'm going to say in this video, keep in mind that I am not a licensed professional, so with that out of the way, I discovered a term that I really enjoy called survivorship bias, and I wanted to talk about that and explain how I've pretty much seen this throughout my entire life, or let's just say like life in general, how much of everything is just like survival bias. Because, I've been thinking a lot about myself and the world, and basically, what is the root of all life? And if you've seen a lot of my videos, I can pretty much tell you that I would pretty much say it is essentially rooted in a lot of pain and suffering. So when I think about this, I mean, even to the very moment that we're born, I believe I also mentioned this in another video. I just can't remember which one in particular, but I know I've said this before, but I'll bring it back again because I think this is really fitting for this video too. Essentially, when we enter the world, we are literally crying. Our first expressions as babies are literally like tears and just nothing but crying, needing to be held by mom like a fucking baby. Yeah, straight up. Yeah, like literally a fucking baby. And as we go through life, literally everything that we use for a crutch is like essentially no different than a fucking pacifier. Like this vape that I'm holding, literally I saw this in a meme basically where yeah, it basically said what I just said, that basically like, you know, habits stay the same, but essentially they just take different fonts. Okay, I'm not using a pacifier, or you're not using a pacifier maybe, or like whatever, but now we got this or whatever the fuck else that we'll do to fill, you know, an empty hole that will never actually be fulfilled because we'll just head into the darkness and die one day, which as shows that all of this is literally for nothing. So why is it that we stay alive essentially? Well, we have this thing called survivorship bias. I first heard of this term when I came across something on Instagram that said, uh, God never gives us more than we can handle is survivorship bias, because those who were given more than they could handle are, fucking dead. And I was reading this and I thought to myself, like, this is just the entirety of like life in general. Everything that we do is rooted in pain, and essentially all of our motives are just trying to like alleviate pain in some way. Like we desire friends for validation, we desire a romantic partner for validation, we eat and drink so we don't have to go through the suffering of like malnourishment, we take a shower and stay clean so we can avoid like various infections and whatnot. It's hilarious that a person could take a shower in the same day and smoke a cigarette that'll literally like deteriorate their lungs. Like, oh, so much fucking irony. And as I think about it more, yes, everything everything is basically just like filtered through pain. And it's hilarious that people just act offended by pessimists, but a lot of the times they don't actually explain how we're wrong half the time, because I think we all know this at our core, that everything is essentially like rooted in pain. Because when people say, oh, it could be worse, it literally proves like the hierarchical standing of like the world basically, because essentially every single time people say that, oh, they're basically saying like, at least you're not that guy, at least you're not that person. But what would you say to the person that was literally at the point where it could be worse, as you say? So what does this prove? Someone has to go through like the worst of the worst just so we could like feel better. That's essentially like like the schematic of life. The schematic of life is basically things eating other things as well, animals eating other animals. Like the way it's designed is rooted in so much pain, suffering, and carnage that like it's honestly just like super awful. And we go through this thing called like survivorship bias as a way to just like make us feel better, because like, oh, at least you're not that person. But the pain literally just keeps like circling around, because if people were to literally examine the self affirmations that they tell each other every single day, like the things that comfort them, kind of like what I just said in terms of like, oh, it could always be like worse or something like that, they're not actually taking that seriously from like the way I see it. Because if they were to actually take it seriously, they would then understand that like there is nothing actually comforting about like life at all. Because when they say, kind of like what I mentioned earlier, like it could be worse, they're essentially just saying, at least you're not that guy. They're not confronting the fact that that could literally be you. At like nothing's like guaranteed that it can't be you. So overall, what runs this world is essentially pain. And basically, much like a lot of the things that I've said in my video talking about how like life is basically like Stockholm syndrome, this is basically Stockholm syndrome. Every single time we could say, oh, it could be worse, because you know how people will say just because somebody has, you know, worse problems, that doesn't mean that like, you know, yours isn't as bad, because that's basically just like toxic positivity. So this, you know, connects all together, that all of human life is basically just put here essentially for suffering. And yeah, again, I'm still not going to call myself like a flat out like antinatalist, but like, okay, maybe they have a point essentially, because we've been gaslit to the point where like all these things that we plaster, all these things that like we cope, we've convinced ourselves that like, oh, life is something, you know, good, or life is something that's like, you know, like fine enough to like, you know, continue, but it is all survivorship bias. Everything that you've done is to just avoid pain in some like fashion or another. Or when people say, oh, look at the bright side, at least there's this, that's literally an attempt to like, you know, dissociate. Either at least I'm not that guy, oh, things could be worse, you could be blah blah blah, or it's like, oh, look at the bright side. So essentially try your best to like dissociate. And people like to act like they're so self-aware, but they're not, because if they were as self-aware as they say, then they would acknowledge that all of this is literally just pain. Why look at the bright side when you know what's rooting the bright side? Essentially, it's an avoidance of pain. So life is pain. Every motivation is rooted in pain, and no pain, no gain is essentially just a gaslight and a result of the Stockholm syndrome that we tell ourselves as a way in order to like feel better. And all of it just just gets wrapped up essentially in survivorship bias. So we live every single day almost deluding ourselves that we're going to see the next day, but we're smart enough to know that like we're going to die. So obviously there's a lot of like cognitive dissonance there. We act as if like our, you know, growth and our understanding of like the world. Okay. And actually speaking of like growth and understanding, this is the only thing that I forgot to mention before I was listing down like the other things that we do as a way to like avoid pain. The only reason you would ever want to like gain knowledge and like study is to like remove the feeling that you're stupid, remove the feeling that like you're inadequate, because that's essentially all information is. Oh, I would like to refine my ideology, I would like to think I know what I'm talking about. Like in actuality, I'm just desperate, and I'm just trying to like, you know, maintain sort of like my cope. I need to be prepared in case I hear other ideologies that contradict mine. And also, another thing, if everyone's saying that it could be worse, then everyone's already at their worst, because your it could be worse is someone else's actual worst case scenario. So literally every single time I hear someone say that, it might as well actually translate to, oh, just live long enough and eventually the wheel of pain will come after you. So keeping survivorship bias in mind, what else is there to think? But you know, keeping that in mind, these same people saying that it could be worse would still probably say the same thing if they were literally in the worst case scenario that they stated, like a broken fucking record. So here's to however much time we have left to, you know, engage in such cognitive dissonance.